up till now we have discussed the different types of communication. We talked about the non-verbal and the verbal types. Within non-verbal we saw that there are again two types, non-written and written communication, and within verbal we have got written and oral communication. Within the non-written communication we have the paralanguage and we have the body language. So this was the discussion in the first session, and you would recall that in the last session we talked about the verbal communication. I hope you recall that verbal communication is use of language, and within verbal communication we discussed oral and written communications, and we did a comparative analysis of the two also. We saw some examples as well. Now today we are going to move on to the non-verbal part. I hope you recall that non-verbal is you are not making use of any language. So you are not making use of a language as such. But then what is written? Have a look. Now please understand, non-verbal is I am not making use of any particular language, right? But then written is, for example, I am making use of a diagram, just like in this particular example that I have taken up here. I am making use of a diagram. Is that okay? Now just clarification, while we are talking about this particular diagram, don't take into account the written part, the labels that I have used here. I am just talking about the diagram. So diagram in itself is non-verbal written communication, but if you start talking about the labels also, like the label here, this circular plane surface. Now this is not part of non-verbal because you are using a language. So just don't take them into account. Just leave them out, and then you will find that the remaining part, the diagram only, is an example of non-verbal written communication. Then have a look at these emoticons, emojis. Now again, you are not making use of any language, so it is non-verbal. Plus, since you have to draw, or you have to write, or you have to type these emoticons, this is an example of non-verbal written communication. So those who are in love, they make use of this particular emoticon to show their feelings, to express their feelings. Then let's have a look at this particular example also of a chart. Now please understand that this chart, again we don't have to take into consideration the written part. Just leave out, just ignore the written part, and you would find that the remaining portion, the chart, tells you that there is an increase in trend in something. There is an increasing trend which can be observed from here. So this is again an example of non-verbal written communication. You don't have to write anything, you only have to draw the chart, and the reader would understand that this chart depicts some increasing trend, right? Then let's have a look at this particular symbol. You don't have to use a language, and this symbol is going to work equally well in India as well as in some other culture also. And this symbol is basically showing some danger, right? So no language has been used, and it is a symbol which has been drawn, so it is a non-verbal written communication. And have a look at these photographs also, again example of non-verbal written communication, right? Why written? Because you have to either draw a particular photograph, or you'll have to click a photograph, you'll have to get it printed. That is why written. No use of language, that is why non-verbal. Now let's have a look at non-verbal communication, which is non-written. So this is non-verbal, non-written communication. The first type of non-verbal, non-written communication is body language. The other type is paralanguage. Now what do we mean by body language? The cloth that you wear. Now please understand, just by looking at this particular photograph, you would be able to understand that this particular individual is wearing a black coat. Probably he is a lawyer. Just by looking at somebody's uniform, or maybe the kind of dress that particular person is wearing, you get to know a lot about that person. What kind of person is he? Is he an outgoing person? Is he a fun-loving person? Is he a sports freak? So somebody who you observe in tracksuit, you'll understand that this guy looks like a sports freak, right? So clothing is an example of non-verbal, non-written communication. Then have a look at accessories. Accessories that you wear apart from clothing. For example, the watch, or maybe the necklace, or maybe the earring that you are wearing, right? These are all examples of accessories. And another example is the tattoo that you get done on your limbs, on your hands, or on your shoulders. So these are all examples of accessories, and they also communicate a lot. See, this guy is wearing, and it looks like a very expensive watch, right? This looks like a very expensive watch, and this communicates that this guy probably is a very affluent fellow. Again, wearing this tattoo, Virat Kohli is shown in this particular picture, and I can see that this depicts a particular kind of image. This is able to communicate a particular image of Virat Kohli just by looking at the kind of tattoo that he has got on his shoulders. I can understand what kind of person he is, right? There are people who get tattooed the name of their family members on their shoulders or on their limbs. So we can understand that there are people who are very much emotional and who are very much dedicated to their family, right? Then have a look at this particular photograph. The way this particular person is sitting, this is called posture. The way you sit, the way you stand, this is an example of a posture. Remember this and don't confuse it with a gesture, right? Now please understand, this posture communicates to you what? Don't you feel that this person is relaxing? So this guy is in a relaxed mood, and this is what we can infer from this particular posture. So the posture also is communicating something. Then have a look at these gestures. Gestures are different from postures. They are basically movement of hand, head, or movement of body, and they show the actual feelings of the person who is showing these gestures, right? So for example, this V gesture that you are seeing here, right, you can understand that this basically is depicting victory signal. So somebody is very happy, very elated. They've probably won an election, or they've probably won a match. So this is what is being communicated by this particular gesture. Now have a look at this particular gesture, which is known as the head tilt gesture, and this shows that this particular person is finding something very interesting, right? So if this is a gesture which has been displayed by a student, I can understand that the student is finding the class very interesting. So this is the head tilt gesture, which shows that the person is interested in whatever he is observing or listening to. Then let's have a look at this particular non-verbal, non-written communication. Also the smile communicates a lot also. Then we have eye contact. Many times the eye contact demonstrates that you are really confident or that you are saying the truth. Fine. The best of the orators, they always maintain an eye contact with the audience, right? So this eye contact is actually communicating the level of confidence or how truthful you are whenever you are saying a thing, right? So these were examples of non-verbal, non-written communication, and within that we talked about the body language. Now we'll be talking about the use of space. I hope you recall this particular terminology from our previous lectures. I told you that how you use space also communicates a lot. Now have a look. Intimate zone. Now what do we mean by an intimate zone? Please understand, these two people, do they look like strangers? Do they know each other, or do they look like close friends? Or maybe do they look like siblings, brothers and sisters? Or do they look like a couple, husband and wife? They look like very, very intimate. They are very intimate to each other. They probably are siblings, brothers, sisters, or they may be a couple, or they may be close friends. So this is an example of intimate zone. Now this is an example of personal distance. What do we mean by this personal distance? Now here, if you look at these two you would find that they're not very close. So this is what we mean by personal distance, which you generally maintain with people who are not very close to you. Maybe with new friends that you have just made after joining BBA, or maybe with your teachers in the class. So this is an example of a personal distance. I can understand that these people, they don't look like close friends, because otherwise they would have been closer together, as was the case in the first picture, right? So this is an example of personal distance. Let's look at social distance. Now these two are not very much acquainted to each other, and that is why the distance between the two is much more. This is an example of social distance. So if you do not know, when you go and meet a doctor, or you are going and talking to a shopkeeper, this is the kind of distance that you maintain. You do not come this close or this close. This is the kind of distance that you maintain. So this is an example of social distance which you maintain with people who are not acquainted with you. Now, how is it different from personal distance? Personal distance are people with whom you are acquainted, but you may not be very, very intimate with them. So it could be a relationship between two neighbors, between a student and a teacher, or between two different colleagues in the same department, two colleagues in the same office. While this is the relationship between two friends, very close together. Now, public distance. When you are not at all acquainted with anybody, you simply do not know, you generally try to maintain this kind of a distance, right? So this is what we mean by use of space, and this use of space is also communicating to us a lot of things. For example, we can understand picture number 1 is probably depicting two people who are very, very intimate. They could be, as I said already, they could be friends, they could be close relatives, they could be very intimate friends, they could be two brothers, two sisters, or brother or sister, they could be a couple, husband and wife, or they might be in a romantic relationship, right? So this study of use of space is actually known as proxemics. So proxemics also tell you a lot about somebody. So if the two individuals are romantically involved, then they would probably be close together, as depicted in the picture number 1. Fine. Now let's talk about the paralanguage part of non-verbal communication. What do we mean by paralanguage? The non-verbal aspects of the spoken word. So if I'm telling you something, the exact words that I'm speaking is basically verbal communication, because it is making use of a language. But the non-verbal aspects, which I don't actually talk about, they are basically parts of paralanguage. You'll understand by taking up some examples. The volume. If I am raising my volume, it could be because of anger, it could be because of excitement. When you are really angry, you raise your volume. Again, when you are really excited, hooray, wow, great, we have won, you raise your volume, right? So this shows a lot the non-verbal part. So what I am saying is different thing, but what is my volume level? How loud am I? That is communicating a lot. If you have gone to console somebody who has lost his father because of the corona pandemic, then the volumes would be much low, right? Then again, speed. It shows urgency. If there is an urgent situation, you would certainly be speaking very fast, right? Accent. Now what do we mean by accent? This is a class of business communication. Hello students. Now this is a Western accent. You can understand that this particular individual has been born and has probably been brought up in Western countries like America. Okay, thank you very much for this particular class. Now this is maybe a Latin American accent or a West Indian accent, because they do not have a T. They do not have any symbol to depict the T sound. So instead of T, they would say the, right? They won't say the tree, they would say the tree. You understand? So just by listening to the accent, I can understand which particular group does he belong to, which particular community, culture does he belong to, and where has he got his education from, and where has he been brought up. Silence. Many times when your parents are not happy with you, rather than saying anything, they simply go silent. So this tells you that they are probably angry with you, or maybe they are not willing to pay attention to what you are saying, or maybe they are introspecting. So silence is also used when you are introspecting something, when you are thinking and you don't want your thoughts to be disturbed. So that is what introspection is, right? So silence is basically communicating that as well. If you see a particular person gazing at the sky and very very silent, you can understand that he's probably introspecting, thinking about something, right? Then stress. What words do you apply stress on? Let's take an example. I love you. Now here the stress is on the word love. This is shown by an underlined word here. So love has been underlined, so you can understand the stress is on the word love, and it shows the depth of feeling. I love you. This is how you speak it out, right? On the other hand, I love you. Now the stress is on you, shown by a line underneath. And please understand, this is how I am going to speak out this particular sentence. The second one, I love you. I love you. So I'm stressing on the word you, and it is showing regret that I have loved a person of this sort, that person does not deserve to be loved. So these are the differences. See again the verbal part in these two examples. The language part is the same. I love you, I love you. But the meaning that they communicate is very, very different depending on the stress. I love you. The stress is on the word love, shows the depth of feeling. I love you. The stress is on the word you, and it shows a regret for loving a particular person. Is that okay? So friends, in the next lecture that we'll talk about formal versus informal communication. Thank you.